Chapter 1. New fanfic. This fanfic will be on the end of the week poll. The poll will choose the next fanfic to pick up. It will be public in my Patreon for everyone to vote. Land of Fire, an unnamed plain. Cold winds howled as the remnants of the Warring States era once again spread over this land. Wearing silver armor from the Warring States period, with the clan emblem of 3 crescent moons on his arm guards, Hagoromo Gensou scanned his surroundings expressionlessly, his mouth twitching slightly. The visitors were all old acquaintances. Reto, Byakuran, Ishikawa. And Gensou took a deep look at the man directly in front of him, dressed in a red and white ceremonial robe, with a fire kanji hat. Senju Hashirama, the freshly appointed First Hokage of Konoha. Before this, he had an even more renowned title. Leader of the Senju clan. God of Shinobi. You really think highly of me. The 5 Kage of the 5 great ninja villages actually teamed up to deal with me alone. Looking at the fire, earth, water, wind, and lightning hats surrounding him and blocking any possible escape routes, Gensou bitterly joked. What did he do to deserve this? No, wait. Was this really necessary? He hadn't done anything heinous or evil. As a transmigrator with excellent qualities, he had always been kind and helpful since being run over by a truck and arriving here. Helping old ladies cross the street, playing chess with old men, buying lollipops for little girls, providing porridge for relief, repairing roads and bridges. Which good deed had he not done? At most, he had just casually cleaned up some low-morality thugs and bullies who bullied the weak. And some cold-blooded, ruthless ninja who treated ordinary lives as nothing and killed at will. Of course, it's normal for the scope of cleaning to expand unconsciously while sweeping trash. Who let this world, under the 9-year compulsory education system, look so unpleasant to him who wasn't among the bottom 9? Fortunately, he had the ability. Thus, following the trail of thugs, his cleaning targets rose to those he deemed unworthy, the ringleaders, landlords, local officials, and even long-standing noble families and highly respected daimyo. Regarding ninja, he also expanded from wandering ninja to clan ninja, and even the new ninja from the large and small villages in this era. This undoubtedly offended many people. But Gensou didn't care. Who was he? The current leader of the prestigious and renowned Hagoromo clan. Although the Hagoromo clan had often been overshadowed by the Senju clan in past confrontations. But being able to fight against the Senju, the top ninja clan, for so many years, and signing a friendly pact with the always proud Uchiha clan, agreeing to cooperate during missions, no one could deny the strength of the Hagoromo clan. Especially with his emergence, the Hagoromo clan's prestige soared. While Hashirama was hailed as the god of shinobi, he was recognized as the most talented among the shinobi, one who could stand shoulder to shoulder with a god. Gensou's current strength had reached the pinnacle of the ninja world. This had been his source of confidence all along. But often, walking by the river, there's no way your shoes won't get wet. This time, it seemed he was falling into a deep pit. At this moment, Gensou felt his heart sink. First Kage Reto, First Hokage, First Mizukage Byakuran, First Tsuchikage Ishikawa. And that person who still impressed him, First Hokage Hashirama. His opponents were all top-tier shinobi from the Warring States era who had put an end to that era. Despite Gensou's immense strength, he couldn't guarantee victory against 5 opponents. Especially with the cheat like Hashirama among them. Game over, game over. As if a flock of crows were circling overhead, lamenting, Gensou took a deep breath, suppressing his turbulent thoughts, and looked around, laughing bitterly. Rare guests indeed. The 5 Kage of the 5 great ninja villages visiting me together. Isn't the ninja world rumored to be holding the 5 Kage summit to divide up the menu? Hearing this, the first Mizukage Byakuran, with a long scar running across his blind left eye and a head full of wild hair, lifted his Mizukage hat and calmly replied. The menu is mostly divided, except for you, the last dish not yet on the table. Gensou glanced at Byakuran without replying and turned his gaze to Hashirama in front. Hashirama, an honest man, noticing Gensou's gaze, sighed. The ninja world has finally welcomed a long-awaited peace, and no one wants to break it. Gensou, you are too powerful, and your ideas are too extreme. After much deliberation, this is our only option. Gensou was dumbfounded. First of all, he wasn't the Nine Tails. Secondly, extreme ideas. What did he say? Gensou was confused for a few seconds, then remembered. His ideas were nothing more than stating that the establishment of the 5 great ninja villages and the existence of the 5 great nations weren't true peace but a 20-year truce. Real peace required unification. He laughed at Hashirama's lack of strategy and Madara's low intellect, and similar remarks. Just for that. Weren't they just empty words? For someone who had studied the way of the keyboard for a long time in his previous life, these remarks were unusual. To painstakingly achieve the unification of the ninja world. He had no interest in that. With that time, would it be more comfortable to study ninjutsu, expand the family, and live a peaceful life behind closed doors? Why'd these people take it seriously? Gensou looked again at the 5 Kage filled with murderous intent around him. For the first time, he experienced the consequences of speaking recklessly for momentary pleasure. I was just speaking casually. I never intended to act on it. Do you believe me? Gensou shrugged, speaking the truth for the last time, not expecting these people to truly listen. Sure enough. Hashirama was about to respond when the impatient First Hokage clenched his fist and said, "So what? Gensou, you deserve to die." The first Hokage Byakuran, First Hokage Reto, and First Tsuchikage Ishikawa nodded in agreement. Ishikawa bluntly stated, the structure of the 5 great ninja villages had been established. For the peace to continue, Hagoromo Gensou, you, the biggest threat outside the 5 great ninja villages, must be eliminated. The daimyo of various countries are very dissatisfied with you, always hoping to get rid of you. Blame yourself for being a ninja who overstepped his bounds and was too ungrateful. The first Kage Reto, who had always worried about funding for his village, added with a smile. The harsh environment of the Land of Wind, with most of its territory being sand, forced him to trade his share of the tailed beasts for funds to build his village during the 5 Kage summit. Many daimyo and nobles, feeling a sense of impending doom, hated Gensou with a passion, and he was eager to take Hagoromo's head for a high bounty. As the nominal masters to whom the ninja villages owed allegiance, the daimyo controlled the vital funds the villages needed, wielding significant influence. Offending the daimyo was a death sentence. Furthermore, the 5 great ninja villages found Gensou, who operated independently of them, highly inconvenient. All these factors culminated in the situation where, under the pretext of the 5 Kage summit, the 5 Kage, who had rarely gathered together, ambushed Gensou while he was unprepared. One-on-one, it was uncertain whether they could defeat him, but Gensou could easily escape. 5-on-1, escape was impossible. Gensou's fate was sealed from the moment they arrived. Future Madara would earn the honor of facing the 5 Kage alone. However, Gensou was granted this grand honor decades earlier. Especially with the rule-breaking Hashirama among them. Gensou had no more illusions. As Ishikawa said, as an outsider, he would be eliminated regardless of the reason, even if he had accidentally stepped on an ant. All for the dominance of the 5 great ninja villages. I was careless. Gensou shook his head. He hadn't considered himself a thorn in some people's sides. But given his strength, he hadn't paid much attention. Complacency was deadly. He thought the 5 Kage summit was only about tailed beast distribution and alliance formation among the 5 great nations, not realizing they had another plan in mind. The 5 Kage actually teamed up to ambush a young man like him. They really did it. But did they consider the price they would pay? Gensou's expression turned cold as he brushed the dust off his armor, his eyes gradually becoming dangerous. At the same time, noticing Gensou's sudden, fierce aura, the Five Kage prepared for battle with serious expressions. Compared to the other four, Hashirama looked more regretful. He genuinely admired Gensou. When Konoha was newly established, he sincerely invited the Hagoromo clan to join the Konoha family. Even though there was much blood feud between the two clans, even though his third brother, Senju Itama, had died at the hands of the Hagoromo clan. If he could accommodate the Uchiha clan, why not the Hagoromo clan? But Gensou refused. Knowing the plot, he had no interest in humbling himself to join a future trouble-ridden and constantly fighting Konoha. He knew too well the future fate of the Senju and Uchiha clans. Moreover, his clan had strong objections. Gensou didn't understand how the proud Uchiha were willing to make peace and work with the Senju. His clan, with a longer history of opposing the Senju, would never agree to shake hands with former enemies and become villagers together. Thus, the Hagoromo clan, which had stood shoulder to shoulder with the Senju and Uchiha during the Warring States era, gradually declined in the decades after the Warring States ended, disappearing from the ninja world stage. Of course, compared to the Senju and Uchiha, who were eventually reduced to a few individuals, the Hagoromo clan, though declined, fared relatively well. Unaware of the future, Hashirama sighed and shook his head. With his nature, he was unwilling to deal with Gensou this way. But the daimyo of the Land of Fire had persistently demanded it, and with the other four Kage agreeing, and his brother Tobarama's constant persuasion, he had finally consented. All for Konoha. Hashirama reached out and touched the fire kanji on his hat, his calm eyes turning sharp. The wind froze at that moment. Cold killing intent filled the valley. Hashirama was about to act. Suddenly, Gensou raised his hand in a pause gesture and said, "Wait a minute." Hashirama stopped, his carefully prepared expression dissolving into confusion. Seeing this, the other four Kage also halted. What was Gensou up to? Begging for mercy? Or cursing them out? Gensou ignored the Kage's confusion, his attention entirely focused elsewhere. At that moment, his mind was fully concentrated. He heard a mechanical sound, ding. His long-awaited system finally arrived. End of chapter. It's a very long prologue. 13 chapters. They're pretty fun, as they set the motions on the story. But nonetheless, it's a prologue, so better rate the story after you read around 20 chapters. 9 comments 0 vote. Chapter 2. Ding. Detected host is a transmigrator, system formally activated. Name, Hagoromo Gensou. Gender, male. Age, 24. Identity, ninja. World, Naruto. An emotionless mechanical voice suddenly rang in Gensou's mind. Gensou instinctively checked himself first, finding no signs of genjutsu before he relaxed. Endless thoughts surged in his mind, ultimately forming one sentiment: this system sure took its time to arrive. At the beginning of his transmigration, young Hagoromo Gensou eagerly awaited the system's arrival, but it never came, leaving him disappointed for a long time. Fortunately, he persevered and reached his current position. Hagoromo Gensou could proudly say that he had achieved his current strength entirely through his own efforts, without any system help. So, I'm already a big shot. Why are you here now, system? No, wait. The system was still useful. Looking at his dire situation, Gensou's eyes lit up. He gestured for Hashirama to wait a moment and eagerly opened the system. This system is the comeback system, dedicated to helping the host overcome barriers of talent, background, and resources, assisting the host in defeating all rivals on the path to becoming the strongest in the ninja world. Please accept the beginner's gift pack. For some reason, the word comeback made Gensou feel uneasy. But seeing the promise of becoming the strongest in the ninja world, he suppressed his doubts and looked forward to the beginner's gift pack. Generally, beginners' gift packs, despite being for beginners, often contained extremely powerful items. Things like the Mangekyo Sharingan, the Rinnegan, or Six Paths Sage Mode. If it could provide something useful for his current situation, that would be great. With such expectations in mind, Gensou mentally said, "Accept." As the words fell, with a brilliant display of fireworks in his mind, the luxurious beginner's gift pack burst open with a boom, and a heap of beginner gifts spilled out. Ding! 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 Congratulations to the host for obtaining the 3 basic jutsu. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Konoha-style taijutsu. Congratulations to the host for obtaining kunai throwing technique. Congratulations to the host for obtaining standard genin level chakra. After reading this information, Hagoromo Gensou fell silent, his initial excitement quickly fading. Was this beginner's gift pack too beginner? The 3 basic jutsu, Konoha-style taijutsu, kunai throwing technique, what were these things? He hadn't even been interested in these since he was 5 years old. As for the genin level chakra, Hagoromo Gensou sensed a small amount of extra chakra in his body, noticeable only upon close inspection. But pouring a cup of water into a river had no effect. I already faced the 5 Kage, and you're giving me beginner level ninja stuff. System, did you give me the wrong beginner's gift pack? Gensou asked repeatedly. After verification, no error was found. Gensou. System, do you think the items in the beginner's gift pack are useful for someone of my current strength? After verification, the beginner's gift pack is very useful to the host. System, are you sure your program isn't malfunctioning? After verification, the system program is functioning correctly. Gensou was speechless. But the system wasn't done yet. Ding. Beginner task being issued. This task is a mainline task, cannot be refused or avoided. Failure penalty. System will no longer serve the host, host's comeback will fail. Fine, even though the system's beginner's gift pack was a bit odd, at least its primary functions were working. Let's see what the first beginner task is. Maybe it has something to do with the 5 Kage in front of me. Maybe it involves holding out against their combined attack for a certain time. Or even harder, defeating 1 or 2 of them. Thus earning great rewards and making a miraculous comeback. Gensou, filled with hope, accepted the beginner task. Beginner task, defeat Uzumaki Naruto. Task description. As an average student at the Ninja Academy, you are unwilling to be ordinary and decide to embark on a comeback journey. Young man with passion, go defeat the dead last student, Uzumaki Naruto, and take your first step on the path to greatness. Task reminder. Completing tasks will grant the host corresponding rewards. Please take tasks seriously. What? Gensou was filled with confusion. What kind of nonsense was this? He knew who Naruto was. But what era was this? Naruto's grandfather hadn't even been born yet, let alone the future protagonist. And when did he attend the Ninja Academy? The academy hadn't even been established in Konoha yet. System, are you sure you're functioning correctly? This beginner task clearly wasn't meant for his current self. Thinking of something, Hagoromo Gensou hurriedly asked. System, what year is it now? Year 60 of Konoha. Gensou. What the hell is year 60 of Konoha? It's only been 2 years since Konoha was founded. He finally understood everything. This broken system had traveled to the wrong time, starting up over 50 years early. Or maybe he transmigrated too early. Damn this comeback system. He should have guessed from the start. Now, facing the 5 Kage alone, who else could he make a comeback against? Hagoromo Gensou took a deep breath, trying to salvage his dignity. It's year 2 of Konoha. After verification, it is confirmed to be year 60 of Konoha. Please follow the system's recognized timeline. What else could Hagoromo Gensou say? How can this task be completed? Give me a different beginner task. Please complete the beginner task as soon as possible. Restart the system. Bring in a smarter one. Please complete the beginner task as soon as possible. Uninstall the system. What's the point of you? Please complete the beginner task as soon as possible. Trash system. Gensou decided to ignore this malfunctioning system. So what if he had to face the Five Kage head-on? At worst, he'd die a glorious death. He had relied on himself all his life, never cheating. That trash system, get as far away as possible. Disappointed, Gensou put the useless system out of his mind. He opened his eyes, refocusing on the Five Kage around him. For the Five Kage to join forces against him, Gensou naturally had not earned his reputation in vain. Calming down and letting go of everything, he fully committed to the fight. The chakra within him surged, and a powerful pressure enveloped the entire plane. Let's begin. Gensou raised his head, speaking coldly. It should have been like this from the start. As he responded. Boom. A deafening sonic boom erupted. The pinnacle battle of the ninja world had officially begun. End of chapter. 9 comments 0 vote. Chapter 3. You've been stalling long enough. It's time to send you on your way. The burly, dark-skinned eye impatiently stomped the ground. A massive amount of lightning release chakra instantly enveloped his entire body, like a fierce blue lightning bolt. Amidst the deafening sonic booms, he appeared beside Gensou first. Lightning release, heavy explosion flow. With a large amount of chakra gathered on his thick elbow, I twisted his waist and fiercely struck forward, aiming straight at Gensou's head. Accompanied by his brutal roar. Die! The wind howled, and thunder roared. Gensou, his black hair wildly blowing, calmly watched the scene and said indifferently, "Why the rush?" As his words fell. Smack! A slender hand effortlessly landed on Ai's striking elbow. Then, the wind ceased, and the thunder fell silent. Everything quickly returned to calm. Ai, just inches away, raised his head, looking at the motionless Gensou in front of him and the iron-like hand that easily blocked his attack. His pupils slightly contracted. Bloodline limit, steel release. Not far away, the first Case Kage Redo, who noticed everything, squinted his eyes and spoke the truth with great apprehension. Chakra nature transformation includes fire, wind, lightning, water, earth, yin, and yang. When two chakra natures are fused, they create a new type of release, known as a bloodline limit. Typically, only a very few ninja can develop their own bloodline limit. Once successful, this new release is recorded in the ninja's genes and passed down to their descendants through bloodlines. Many ninja clans stand tall in the ninja world because they possess bloodline limits. As the leader of a village, Redo shouldn't be overly concerned about bloodline limits. But what if the enemy had more than one bloodline limit? Redo was lost in thought. Ahead, Ai's anguished roar snapped him back to reality. He turned to see Ai's burly body rocket backward like a missile. Rakage. Truly a hasty lineage. With one hand gripping Ai's elbow, Gensou calmly remarked, then, not giving Ai a chance to counterattack, his figure flashed, bursting out with speed even faster than Ai's earlier. Before Ai could react, Gensou struck him with a powerful punch, sending him flying. But it wasn't over yet. Under the gaze of the other 4 Kage, Gensou seemed to teleport, appearing beside the airborne Ai in the blink of an eye. Just as he raised his elbow, about to strike Ai's head in return. A dignified voice suddenly intervened. Wind release, pressure damage. A wind release jutsu, far more overwhelming than those performed by ordinary ninja, erupted from Redo's hands. Gensou looked up to see a high-density, sky-darkening wind mass sweeping towards him like doomsday. As expected of the one who ruled the desert with overwhelming power, founding the hidden sand village. Just this one move was far superior to the future unlucky Case Kage. Seeing this, Gensou's hands changed position, using the thick-skinned Ai as a human shield. Don't underestimate the Rakage, you bastard. Realizing the situation, Ai furiously roared, releasing even more chakra comparable to that of a tailed beast. Strongest lightning armor. With his short black hair standing on end, resembling a Super Saiyan transformation, I exploded with his strongest power, breaking free from Gensou's grip and attacking him with wild, unrestrained fury, ignoring the close approaching wind jutsu. Boom! 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 The intense collision sounds echoed continuously. So fast. On the distant battlefield. The 5 ninjas accompanying the cage to the summit, both as guards and future second-in-command of their respective villages, watched the battle without blinking. As they struggled to keep up with the fiercely clashing figures of Gensou and I, they couldn't help but feel amazed. If they were in the arena, they'd likely be defeated quickly by these two. Well, except for one person. Wrapped in bandages, wearing a gray vest, and carrying 2 katana, the future second Tsuchikage Mu glanced at the silver-haired Tobirama beside him, thinking that this first-speed ninja would not be inferior to them and might even surpass them. Konoha truly was full of talents. Tobirama ignored his temporary companion's scrutiny. With his arms crossed, he was eyeing Gensou like a treasure, filled with anticipation. Steel release, swift release, and other bloodline limits reported in intelligence. As expected of someone who could rival a god, developing so many bloodline limits on his own. I really want to study him thoroughly. Boom. A violent shockwave spread rapidly in all directions from the two as the center. Stepping back a few paces, Gensou looked at I, who had caught up to his speed, and shook his slightly burning hand. This first Hokage was no ordinary person. Even with steel release, his body was feeling the pain. Seeing the incoming wind release, pressure damage, Gensou glanced at a somewhat annoying gaze from a distance, clapped his hands, ignored the crazed eye closing in on him, and said expressionlessly. Lava release, lava monster jutsu. A large amount of sticky and highly corrosive acid appeared out of nowhere around Gensou. It formed a protective layer around him while also erupting like a volcano, spreading rapidly in all directions. Ai's expression changed instantly. Usually fearless with his strong body, he quickly retreated, warily avoiding the lava release that made him uneasy. Ai's figure disappeared. In the next second, Redo's jutsu struck fiercely. The wind howled. The sound of molten rain. The collision of the two powerful jutsu caused massive destruction within a 100-meter radius. Ordinary ninja couldn't survive in such an environment. Fortunately, those present were the pinnacle of the ninja world. I reappeared beside the other 4 Kage. Ignoring the residual effects of the 2 jutsu, he tore off his tattered Hokage robe and waited quietly for the jutsu to end. He naturally didn't believe that such methods could harm Gensou. Nor did the other Kage. Excluding Hashirama, the 4 Kage exchanged glances. It was time to go all out and end this quickly. End of chapter. 5 comments 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. Zaelum. Download app now. Chapter 4. After a short while, everything temporarily returned to calm. The devastated land was dotted with molten lava blown apart by the wind pressure. At Gensou's location, a massive protective barrier still stood tall. As the sound of footsteps echoed within, a crack appeared and spread open, and the unharmed Gensou walked out calmly. Wind release, continuous vacuum wave. Upon seeing this, Redo wasted no time. His hands swiftly formed seals, and dozens of spinning wind blades, each as tall as a person, shot towards Gensou from all directions. Without even looking, Gensou used swift release. No matter how fast the wind blades were, they couldn't touch his clothes. Prepared, Ishikawa suddenly slammed his hands on the ground. Earth release, yellow spring swamp. In an instant, the ground within a few hundred meters of Gensou turned into a vast swamp. Standing within it, Gensou felt his movements hindered, forcing his speed to drop. So quick to find a countermeasure. Gensou snorted, twisted his waist, and threw a heavy punch at the first Mizukage Byakuran, who had suddenly appeared behind him. Smack! Water splashed. Byakuran's head burst open like a watermelon, and his entire body collapsed like flowing water. A water clone. Gensou glanced at it, about to turn around. The dissipating water clone of Byakuran suddenly gathered again, forming long water whips that quickly wrapped around Gensou's body. Got you. Byakuran's figure rose from the muddy river, tightly gripping one end of the water whips. He looked coldly at the close-at-hand Gensou and said. Gensou looked down at the water whips binding him tightly like a sealing technique, then looked up at Byakuran with a smile. Oh. Really? Byakuran's expression changed, instinctively tightening the water whips. With a poof, Gensou turned into a puff of white smoke, disappearing in front of him. A shadow clone. When? Shadow clone. At the same time, outside the battlefield, Mew once again looked at Tobirama in surprise. He knew that Tobirama had invented the shadow clone technique. But since when was Konoha's shadow clone technique spread outside? Tobirama ignored Mew. His face appeared expressionless, but inside, he was roaring, "That's my invented technique. That's my shadow clone." For the first time in his life, Tobirama deeply experienced the feeling of having his achievements freely used without permission. Of course, this situation would happen more often in the future. Gensou's shadow clone had not been obtained through legitimate means. A Konoha ninja had used the shadow clone technique in front of him once. With his outstanding talent and knack for various bloodline limits, he easily learned it after a few attempts. One had to admit, it was an excellent clone technique. Neither the Sharingan nor the Byakugan could discern the authenticity of a shadow clone, and the same applied to Byakuran. But this was only temporary. With his hands still on the ground, Ishikawa suddenly turned his head in a certain direction and coldly said, "The earth is my domain. Gensou, you can evade once, but not a second time." As he spoke, the ground trembled. Giant hands made of earth suddenly emerged from the ground, grabbing fiercely at a seemingly empty spot. Gensou appeared and shook his head in admiration. "Brother, the glory of transparent release ends here." With that, he clapped his hands and shouted, "Water release, great waterfall technique." A massive wave surged from behind Gensou, dispersing the approaching earth hands and turning the churning lava into a vast ocean. Ishikawa quickly retreated. Byakuran clapped his hands on the water's surface. Unlike the Hokage, who rarely excelled in fire release, Byakuran had mastered water release to a profound degree, living up to his title of Mizukage. Water release, water fang bullet. Dozens of whirlpools suddenly appeared around Byakuran, transforming into columns of water that surged towards Gensou. This was only the beginning. Utilizing the advantageous terrain created by Gensou, Byakuran could exert even greater power with minimal effort. But what Byakuran could think of, so could Gensou. Facing the rapidly approaching water columns, Gensou smiled calmly and formed a single seal. Ice release, ice fang bullet. Crack, crack, crack. All the approaching water columns rapidly cooled and solidified into ice pillars in midair. At Gensou's command, they turned and shot towards Byakuran and the other attacking Kage, Reto, Ishikawa, and I. Boom. The heavy ice pillars struck the water's surface, creating huge splashes. Byakuran dodged the ice release attacks with a grim expression, feeling deeply conflicted. The ice release of the Yuki clan. How many bloodline limits does Gensou possess? Not just him, but Reto, Ishikawa, I, and even Hashirama, who hadn't participated in the battle, along with the 5 future second-generation Kage in the distance, were all stunned. Although they knew Gensou was incredibly talented, his abilities far exceeded their expectations. After all, bloodline limits were extraordinary. Even possessing one could give a ninja clan significant standing and power in the ninja world. Those who developed bloodline limits and founded ninja clans were all outstanding figures in the ninja world. Yet these historically renowned individuals paled in comparison to Gensou. In such a short battle, he had displayed steel release, swift release, lava release, transparent release, and ice release, 5 bloodline limits. Previously, the most anyone had mastered was 2 bloodline limits. This comparison was unprecedented and likely never to be repeated. It's unimaginable that someone like this exists in the ninja world. Future second Mizukage Hazuka Genjutsu scratched his head, looking troubled. Initially, he and the other future second-generation Kage didn't understand why the Five Kage had to team up against one person, Gensou. It felt like overkill. Now they realized how right that decision was. In a one-on-one fight, except for the Hokage, none of the other four Kage could confidently say they could defeat Gensou. Hearing this, Tobirama, for the first time, spoke and nodded. That's why such a person must be eliminated. As a talented individual himself, he admired Gensou's achievements on the path of a ninja. But as a politician, he understood that such an uncontrollable person couldn't be allowed to exist. Gensou was too young. When their generation grew old, no one could control him. Blame it on being born in the wrong era. Tobirama shifted his gaze from Gensou to the observing Hashirama, who had a growing battle fervor in his eyes, and shook his head. With his extraordinary brother around, no matter how remarkable one's talent was, it would eventually fade. This, he knew all too well. End of chapter. 5 comments 0 vote. Chapter 5. Even as enemies, the Five Kage, standing at the pinnacle of the ninja world, had to marvel at the incredible talent of Gensou, the strongest member of the Hagoromo clan in 1,000 years. As the person in question, Gensou was not particularly satisfied with this. The essence of ninjutsu lies in the nature transformation and shape transformation of the 7 chakra attributes. From the beginning, Gensou's purpose in training was clear. It was not to master bloodline limits but to go further and obtain the power of net. The net is a fusion of the 7 nature transformations of fire, wind, earth, water, lightning, yin, and yang, surpassing bloodline limits and bloodline selections. Not all 6 paths level beings possess the net, but those who do are undoubtedly top tier in power. Kagaya and Hagoromo possess the net. As a ninja, Gensou naturally aspired to become a 6 paths level being. This not only meant unrivaled power in the ninja world but also immortality. Reborn, he did not wish to be buried within a mere 100 years. Although the Hagoromo clan had a long history, tracing back to the era of ninja monks and even having connections to the legendary Sage of 6 Paths, their bloodline had diluted over time. It was impossible for him to ascend to the 6 Paths level solely based on bloodline advantages like the Otsutsuki clan. As for another method, becoming the 10 Tails Jinchuriki to reach the 6 Paths level. Knowing that Kagaya had merged with the 10 Tails after consuming the chakra fruit, Gensou had already decided to stay away from that path, fearing he might end up like the laughingstock of the Uchiha clan. Excluding these 2 paths, the only remaining option was to honestly pursue the way of the net, thoroughly studying and perfectly merging the 7 chakra nature transformations. There were those in the ninja world who mastered all 7 chakra nature transformations, like Kakashi. But no one had ever fully comprehended and merged all 7 nature transformations. Since transmigrating, perhaps due to being reborn, Gensou had been extraordinarily talented in chakra from a young age, often praised as the model child. In a short time, he had mastered all 7 chakra nature transformations. But going deeper, especially achieving the perfect fusion of all 7, proved extremely challenging even for someone as gifted as him. Although he hadn't achieved the net, the bloodline limits, which only required the fusion of 2 chakra natures instead of 7, were easier for him to develop in various combinations. This led to his current reputation as a person who could rival gods. Unfortunately, it's not true divinity. Even the so-called god of the ninja world today can't be considered. On the rippling water surface, Gensou watched the 4 Kage breaking through his ice release with their various techniques and shook his head in regret. He needed more time, but it seemed he didn't have enough. Perhaps, I should prepare an escape plan. Gensou glanced again at a conspicuous white-haired figure in the distance, observing the battlefield with crossed arms. Before the person could notice, he quickly withdrew his gaze. Please complete the beginner task promptly. The system's cold reminder rang in his mind once more. Stupid system. Cursing habitually, Gensou ignored the malfunctioning system and refocused on the battlefield. The 4 Kage had launched their counterattack, and various dazzling ninjutsu, performed on a scale far beyond ordinary ninja, swept towards him. A bunch of old geezers, why don't you just die already? Gensou shook his head and formed a single hand seal, ice release, ice whale. A deep, resonant bellow echoed through the sky. Under the shocked gaze of the 4 Kage, an unimaginably massive ice whale leapt from the water, raising enormous waves, and descended upon them with overwhelming force. In the next second, boom, 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 the ground shook and mountains trembled. A massive shockwave, carrying water and debris, swept rapidly in all directions. Gensou waved his hand to disperse the incoming shockwave, raising an eyebrow. As the caster, he could feel the state of his jutsu. As the smoke cleared, he saw Ishikawa, wearing the Tsuchikage robe, using incredible strength to hold up the colossal ice whale descending from the sky. Earth release, super lightweight rock technique. Ishikawa, whose originally short figure now appeared immensely powerful, gritted his teeth as he straightened his waist bit by bit, lifting the enormous ice whale above his head. Take it back. Ishikawa threw the ice whale with exaggerated force, sending it hurtling back towards Gensou. Stubborn stone. Retracting his gaze from Ishikawa, Gensou glanced at the returning ice whale. Forming seals again, he converted the ice whale back into a vast ocean, planning to use it against the approaching Iron Redo. But just as he was about to give the command, an external chakra force suddenly intervened, contending for control over the water. Byakuran. Gensou spat out the name. Taking advantage of this gap, Iron Redo successfully closed in on him. Let's go again. Bursting with chakra comparable to a tailed beast, now enveloped in even more chakra, sped up and clenched his fist, striking Gensou with tremendous force. Gensou didn't retreat. Utilizing steel release, his right fist turned as black and hard as tempered steel and met I's punch head-on. Clang. The sharp sound of metal clashing echoed. With a body equally strong as a monster's and comparable to steel release, I only retreated a short distance, unharmed. Gensou was also forced back a few steps by the impact. As he prepared to counterattack, a strange wind suddenly appeared beside him. Before Gensou could react, a sharp point aimed straight for his eye at lightning speed. Steel release could cover the entire body but couldn't protect the eyes. This was Redo, who had drawn his ninja blade, infused with razor-sharp wind release chakra, and stabbed towards Gensou. But it wasn't over. The giant hands that had previously supported the ice whale suddenly emerged from beneath Gensou, grabbing his legs and immobilizing him. Meanwhile, Byakuran, having appeared at Gensou's side without his notice, extended his hands, swiftly forming a water prison technique at the Mizukage level. Even if Gensou managed to fend off Redo's attack, he wouldn't escape the prison Byakuran had prepared for him. Everything happened so fast. In the blink of an eye, the 4 Kage had seamlessly coordinated to deliver their ultimate strike against Gensou. End of chapter. Next chapter.